But there were so many times where I would just sit there and look at this cast, and everyone's smiling, and everyone's happy, and everyone's working very hard, and working very fast. And I'm like, there's nothing I could do that could make that happen. There's nothing my other producers could do that could make that happen. I'm like, that's the Lord telling us to do it the right way, to get together, to become a unit before we ever even get on a film set. And so it's like those moments of just community that I find to be like the Lord is right there.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the ROYL Life Podcast. We're so glad that you've joined us again for another great episode. This week we are joined in the virtual studio by Jacob Johnston. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited to dive into this week's episode. What we're going to be talking about today is some of the cool work you've done, and like me, I love media, so hearing a little bit of some of the stuff you've done through podcasting, radio, drama, comedy, and then some of the movie work you've done. This is going to be a fun episode for me. I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm excited to hear a little bit more about you and, again, the work you've done. So With that, let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself to the listeners, and just introduce yourself and tell us your testimony.
Yeah, so I'm Jacob Johnston. I live in Nashville, Tennessee right now, originally from Virginia. Spent most of my life in Virginia. I'm a professor by day, so that's what I do during the day is I teach screenwriting, film, media, English, anything writing-based or video film-based, and a little bit of audio drama or audio storytelling as well. I grew up in the church. I've known the Lord pretty much all my life, but I do say that I kind of rededicated my life about 17 years ago when I was in my second senior year at the University of Kentucky, which is kind of ironic. I actually just got baptized this past week.
Awesome.
Well, maybe like a week and a half ago. I don't know. The pastor was like, "Why'd you wait so long?" I was like, "I don't know. Life kind of gets in the way." And so anyway, and then after that, I went to grad school, and I have been doing faith-based media for a long time, and I got into teaching pretty early on too. So that's been most of my career. I started doing media stuff when I was younger, and then when I got to about college, I was like, okay, I want to start doing something with more of a purpose to it. And that's how I got where I am right now. I have a kind of a boring testimony. I'm sorry. It's not. A lot of people reach out and they're like, you should make a movie about my testimony. I'm like, I wouldn't make one about mine because it's kind of boring, but it's mine and it's unique. So.
Yeah, and there's no testimony that's a boring testimony.
Yeah.
It's just an awesome story of what God has done in our lives. Thankfully, both of us have been raised in a Christian home to where we knew Christ at a young age to prevent us from what could have happened in the future. But that's awesome to hear that, and it's awesome that you followed the Lord in baptism just this past week. So praise the Lord for that, man.
I don't know why it took so long, but yeah. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, so better now than never. So
awesome, exactly. Man. Yeah. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I have a brand new 5.5-month-old daughter, first child at 40. So we're very tired people. But we love her.
Awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
And right now my wife and I just have a little puppy, so I can only imagine having a little one. But I'm sure it's a blessing along with it. So
it is, but enjoy your time.
Yeah,
time is hard to find these days. But,
yeah,
but it's it's great. I love that little girl. She's sweet. Sometimes.
Awesome. You mentioned you were a UK grad,
Oh
And
yeah.
I knew I liked you when she said that. I'm like, oh, I like him even more now, man. I'm a UK fan. I love the Wildcats.
Oh, it's a good week too. It's a really good week to be a
Nice.
Kentucky fan.
Yes, it
I
is.
yeah, oh gosh, yeah. Um, I love I grew up loving horse racing and college
Hmm.
basketball. I don't gamble. I'm not really a gambler or anything. I just
Hmm.
love the sport. I love college
Hmm.
basketball, and I ended up at University of Kentucky, which is like a mecca for both. And
Yes.
so I love. I'm we're in the thick of the season right now. I'm loving it. Love
Hmm.
every minute of it.
That's awesome. Who has
Yeah.
been your favorite UK player over the years?
Uh, I loved. Okay, so I was friends with one of them. So Ramel Bradley
Oh,
in mid
nice.
2000s. I got to know him in a
Hmm.
class. We had our own handshake. So I love Ramel Bradley. He had a he had he had a he had a heck of a personality. So I loved him. Um, love John Wall, big John Wall
Yeah.
fan. I'm kind of I didn't really follow Kentucky until I got there. So the kind of
Hmm.
earlier Kentucky, I don't really know a ton about, but so yeah, those, and then I love Chuck Hayes, who was there at the time too. He seemed like a solid human. So I'd say yeah, probably those three are my favorites. But
Yeah, I'm with you on the John Wall. John Wall is one of my favorite players for the team.
man, he was good. He's just
Hmm.
like I love the big personalities, but then he could like back it up on the court. Just so
Yeah.
much fun. Golly, love college basketball.
Yeah. While you were down at UK, did you ever go to like Big Blue Madness and all that when they
Oh yeah,
had the events?
yeah. So I was there for 2.5 years, and I joined this thing called the Student Athletic Council because I was a part of
Cool.
Baptist Student Union and Campus Crusade for Christ. I went to both. And Campus
Awesome.
Crusade is actually where I kind of got into doing a lot of sketches. But everybody in Baptist Student Union was part of the Student Athletic Council. So we would go to sports that didn't typically have fans, and we would be the fans, and you get like a point for it. And then we'd go like roll um, posters and stuff like that, do all the kind of the busy work that they would hand out, and you get points for that too. And then you could cash in the points to get really good tickets to basketball and football games. So I would go to Big Blue Madness. I I didn't go to a ton of football games just because I was usually busy those weekends. But
Hmm.
basketball season came around. I missed like 2 home games in the 2.5 years
Wow.
that I was there. Oh,
That's
I was in the eruption zone, face painted,
nice.
sleeping outside. Like we did it up.
That's awesome. And I didn't know that was a thing. That's really neat that you got to do that
Yeah.
and be the fan for those teams that didn't have a big following almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was a college I played college tennis for 2 years,
Hmm.
and then I transferred to Kentucky. So I played at a small school. And you work hard to get into college and play sports. Like it's a huge thing. So it gave me a better perspective. Like when I went to go to women's soccer games or volleyball games, I'm like, there may not be a lot of people here, but these people work just as hard as the basketball
Yeah.
players work to get where they are, and they're elite. So it's like,
Hmm.
so I actually did sports broadcasting afterwards, and that was something I brought into it. Was like, yeah, no matter what game I'm calling, those people worked hard to get there, and so I need to treat it like it's the biggest game in the world. So that's kind of been my mentality of that. I but I love it. I love sports.
Awesome, man. And you mentioned the Campus Crusaders, and that's really where you got your start with what you have now, the Main Street Music Show.
Music show. Yep.
Uh, what was that? Yeah, where was that journey? Um, how'd you get to that where you are today from Campus Crusaders?
Yeah. So I started that small school, and I did some radio there at this little tiny place in Whitesburg, Kentucky. And so we did like some comedy radio, and I really enjoyed that. I'd done little sketches here and there, but not really much. But I loved sketch comedy. Grew up loving sketch comedy. So when I got to Kentucky and I went to Campus Crusade, they had a sketch team, and I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, that's it. I want to be a part of that. So I went to him. I said, hey, I have a camera. I can edit. Will you let me do some stuff? And within 2 weeks, I was writing, producing, and starring in pretty much every single thing that we did. We would alternate. One week we'd be on stage. The next week I would do a video. And then, so we do that every Thursday. And so we got like 200, 300 people were there. So it got to be fun. We kind of got off track a little bit.
Hmm.
We didn't do as much for a purpose as we probably should have. But it helped me, I mean, when you're in that kind of situation, the dumber you are and you have room to fail. You have a lot of room to fail. That's why I love college. It's a great place to fail. And so I got to fail a lot. I wrote a lot of bad sketches,
Huh.
but they still played well because everyone knew everybody. So anyway, that was just a great free space. And it's funny because I had to beg one of my professors to give me a passing grade the day after I actually walked graduation because I was putting so much effort into the fun stuff that I was doing that I wasn't putting enough into my classes. So but yeah, that was, I don't know, that was kind of my dream was like, I was like, I think I could write sketches. And then I had the opportunity to do it. And I'm like, I can do this. They're not great, but I can do them. And then I ended up taking that I went to grad school afterwards, and that was a grind, but I needed a creative outlet, so I became the mascot because at Kentucky, all the mascots went to Campus Crusade, and they were all Christian guys. And I was like, I
Cool.
want to be a part of this. So I tried out for the mascot, didn't get it at Kentucky. And then the last year, I became the mascot of the minor league baseball team there and got to know the guy, the head Wildcat. And he said, hey, I like what you're doing. If you go to grad school here, we'll give you the mascot position as soon as I graduate. And for some reason, I turned that down and I ended up at Liberty University. And I reached out to them and I said, hey, I'm coming to grad school. Can I mascot for you guys? And they were like, yeah, we'll let you do it. So I actually got hired as the mascot before I even got into the school. Um, so that's what got me through grad school was 2 years of mascotting at games and putting on more sketches with nonverbal
Nice.
sketches. Yeah. So
Oh, that's cool. Uh, Now, going back a little bit further, how did you know you want to pursue media and sketches and just almost acting?
I grew up watching TV, not a lot of TV, but I grew up watching TV, and my dad was really into writing, and we would sit at night and we'd either go to a basketball and football game, if high school game, or we'd sit and watch old John Wayne movies. And I just love. I mean, my dad's a storyteller. My family's they're all storytellers, and so it just kind of naturally ingrained in who I am. So, and then my sister really got into. Well, my parents were kind of in Saturday Night Live, and so at a young age I was exposed to that. Then my sister got into Kids in the Hall, and then there's a couple other sketch groups that came out in the mid '90s, early mid '90s, and so I started watching that, and I just was like, these people they're making people laugh and they're making people smile. They're making people have a good day. Um, and I just thought to myself, like, and I would go to concerts, but to see a lot of music, and I would just see people on stage, and I'm like, they're having a good time, and they're making a lot of other people have a good time too. And I was like, that's what I want to do. Is just uh, like I had no other. I mean, I was really good at math, so they wanted me to be a engineer, but I was like, I have
Hmm.
no interest whatsoever in engineering, like no interest. I want to do something in front of people, which I'm a very introverted person, but I was like, I want to be doing something for people to make them laugh and to make them just enjoy media. So I did go through a dark period where I was like kind of doing like this dark, grungy stuff, but at a certain point, I was like, you know what? There's plenty of darkness out here. Let's try to bring a little bit of light to things, and that's just it. Just feels so much more natural to me. So
That's cool. And it's neat to see that the Lord's using that passion you had for sketch comedy for His glory. And at first, I didn't know anything about the Main Street Music Show. Um, how did that really get launched? I know you said it was kind of got its start again with the Campus Crusade, but how did
mhm.
you come up with the name for the show, and where did it really, um, again, get to where it is today?
So it's I'll try to shorten the story. I was in film. I got in film right after grad school. I started working at Liberty University, and then I was meeting all these people who were going through the communications department. So, and film was what I wanted to do. So we started doing films, and really early on, within a couple years, we did a feature. Tanked. It just wasn't good. Action film. So we were like, all right, let's start doing these like 48-hour film projects just to kind of learn some skills and do a bunch of shorts, and then we won't waste a lot of time on them. And so I started just thinking, all right, well, let's just do some fun stuff. And so I started writing like these little short films that were like fun and a little bit funny. And so after a while, we started doing really well with them. So I was like, okay, but I want to like, this is what I love to do. How can I make this the thing? So I put together a sketch comedy show pilot, got some funding for it, rented out a theater and did 2 nights of it in Lynchburg, Virginia. And it was video, costumes, all the thing. Went great. Like, it went so well. But keeping the cast together was really difficult to do, really hard thing. So I put it on the shelf again, went back making more short films. Um, and then I had this idea of doing like a morning talk show, morning radio show. I'm a big Prayer Home Companion fan too, with Garrison Keeler. So I had this idea for many years, but it was so big. Like, I was like, I want a band, I want all this stuff. But then I talked myself out of it, kept going. And then finally it was in 2020. I already had the kind of the name for it. When I grew up in a little small town in Virginia, and we would go to these concerts every Thursday night in the summer, just these little local, like, folk, bluegrass, bands right off Main Street. And so I thought to myself, like, if I do a show, I want to make it recreate what I grew up watching and listening to. So it was right off Main Street. So I figured Main Street Music Show it's got a fun little ring to it. So I nailed that down. And then in 2020, um, when pandemic hits, and at this point, I did a project. I went back to school and got an MFA, and I had to do a project. I had to do a film in the middle of COVID. So I filmed inanimate objects in my apartment, and then I had all these actors that I knew send me their audio, and we put it together. It was okay. But that gave me the idea of like, okay, they all have audio equipment. Let me just get on a Zoom call with them. They could send me their audio, and then I could piece the thing together. So the first episode is a hot mess because I have great actors, but none of them were together when they recorded. So I was just kind of piecing things together. And then the second show, um, I I found 2 actors. One of them I knew for a long time, and I had first episode I had one guy bail, and then I had another guy, and then he bailed, and so I was like, I knew this guy like 8 years ago. Let me contact Dan, and so I contacted him, and he was like, yeah, I'll do it, and he can do anything, like absolutely anything. And then after that episode, people like, hey, there's this girl, Jamie Cloutier. She's so talented. She can do anything. So I was like, okay, let me call her up. We talked, and I was like, this is my cast. This is all I need right here. So we went on and did a second episode, just the three of us. And at that point, I was like, all right, this is my core. I can start building and adding people in, but I'm going to build off this core. And, so I will say this too. So a lot of the films that I did were faith-based films, but I never felt super comfortable doing faith-based films because my brother has like a PhD. My brother-in-law has like a PhD in like religion, and it's like he knows
Mm-hmm.
theology, he knows all that stuff really well. I'm communications, like that's all I've ever learned.
Yeah.
So I just felt like a little bit nervous putting out messages like that I was like not 100% because I'm like I'm gonna have to answer for this one day, and a little nervous of that.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, I shifted my mindset and I said, all right, let me just imagine that pretty much all my characters are Christians. What would they do? And then I started writing based on that because I was like, I know what that's like. Um, so now I've started to incorporate a lot more. I kind of like to sneak stuff in, not sneak it in, but just do it in, add like scripture and add parables in, and be very obvious about it, but it fits in a way that doesn't seem like it's over the top. So some of my sketches are just stupid, but like Christmas episodes, I try to put a lot of. I usually try to have one sketch that's like, okay, this is why we do what we do. So I don't ever shy away from it, and I try to incorporate it in a very creative, funny way that doesn't downplay the importance of the message. But that's been a hard
Yeah.
balance, and I'm finding it. Just taking time.
That's neat to see that too. And I've been listening through those episodes as well. And you all do a great job of putting that together. And again, tying in those biblical values and um, just messages into those sketches. They're funny, but at the same time, you're trying to learn something through that. And y'all do a great job of blending the two together and marrying those two. Um, and
Well,
it
I
was neat.
appreciate that.
Again,
We're still
when I
working
first
on it.
interacted with, yeah, yeah, that's all it is just growth. And it's just neat to see the progression that you guys have done. And um, you said this started in 2020,
Mhm.
or when you got your feet wet into the first episode,
Yeah, 2020
or okay.
was the first one we did. Yeah.
Okay. But it's just neat to see that progression to the latest episodes. And um, is it, correct me if I'm wrong, I was looking at your website right before we started this interview. So it's an episode each month, and it kind of ties into the theme of that month. So you had like a Halloween one for October, and then um, November is more of a Thanksgiving type theme.
Yeah, so we're on our third season, even though we're on our fifth year, because um, at first I was just uh, like I was putting them together when I could get them. So the first season's like 3 or 4 episodes because I was like, that's all I can get to, or 5 episodes, I think. Second season, I had to move to Nashville, and so I only got like 3 episodes out over whatever. So every time I took a break, I made a new season. But I'm at a point now where I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is my thing. This is what I feel like I was called to do, and it's taken me 27 years to get here.
Mm-hmm.
So in May, we did our third live episode. Had a new cast come in. They did a great job. But we started in May, and I told myself, and my daughter was born in June. I told myself, I'm like, no matter what you do, get one episode out every month. And so I've had a couple of compilation episodes that I did just because I was like, that month was rough. But we have been able to get an episode out every month, and I love holidays because that gives me a lot of material. So Halloween's easy to write.
Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving's great. Christmas great. Uh, Valentine's Day is a fun one. Um, so yeah, I try to make it relevant. The great thing is I write pretty much the whole show, and I write it up until the day we record it. And really, if I could just find more time, I could have the thing out within 24 hours of recording it. So that's our goal with it, is to do it so fast that the sketches are still relevant. The jokes of what's going on in the world are on this episode. So the dream is to get it live every single episode. I'm working towards that and doing it live in front of an audience. We're not there yet, but we're doing a couple of those. But I want it to, like, pretty much as soon as we record it, it's in the world. And so, and we write up, and I mean, I write like minutes before we record. So the turnaround's very fast. I love that. I love the Saturday Night Live. I love that. Like, let's get it out in the world as fast as we can, and let's stay relevant. And then the nice thing is, not a lot of post production, which I don't like post production anymore. And the other thing is, we can just, if we have some sketches that don't work or whatever, it's like, okay, well, the next day we start with a fresh slate, and I have to come up with 6 to 10 more ideas to write about. And so we just start all over again.
So each episode is one take, and just one one recording session.
One recording session. I do a little bit of editing, but I even tell them during the recording, I'm like, if you mess up, keep going, and if it's bad enough, we'll go back and we'll cut that little chunk out, but we'll keep going. One, because I like the liveness, because I can be a perfectionist, and that's one issue with film, is if you're a perfectionist, then you'll never finish anything. So with this, the non-perfect element of it, the rawness, is what I think is kind of fun. And so that's why I tell them, like, and that's what's great about the actors that I've been able to work with, is they're kind of like musicians. They just keep going. Like, they just don't stop. And I told them, I was like, just treat every episode like it's live, and we just got to get to the end. And we do.
That's awesome. I think that's one of the reasons people love Saturday Night Live and those sketch comedies. It's real. It's in real time. There's no let's take two type thing. It's like, once you're in the mic, you're in the mic, and
Yeah.
You just roll with it. Even if you crack, you're going with it. So
Yeah.
that's interesting that you write the script 24 hours before recording. That's
Yes.
awesome.
So we just wrote we just recorded yesterday, and I had all the sketches written within a week. I write them usually within a week, and I was on a run yesterday afternoon, and I thought of a better ending for a sketch, and so I came back and I just knocked it out really quickly, and within an hour, it's recorded and it's done, and we moved on. And one other fun thing is that we're an audio based, we have a video aspect to what we're doing, but we're not in costumes. We don't have sets. It's an audio, it's a podcast that's a live show. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're playing to two audiences. We have the audience that's in front of us if we're doing a live show, and then we have the audience that's listening. And so I like to write in a way that, like, the audience in front of us gets a different version of the show than the audience that's just listening, because they get to see the behind the scenes. If we're like messing up and we're making facial expressions of like, what are you doing? They get to see that, but the audience listening has no idea that any of that's happening. And so it's a great challenge, but it just is so satisfying when it works.
It's awesome. So as far as sound effects go in your episodes, are those done on the spot as well?
If it's, I've done both. The goal is to get, so if there's anybody in Nashville who wants to do live sound effects, hit me up. But I've done one show where we had a sound effects team at SonicCon in 2023. We had a sound effects team, so I really played up sound effects in that show. But then the recorded ones, I'll add sound effects in later. The goal is to get away from that. I want everything to be happening live, but right now that's where we are.
Cool. And you kind of alluded to this already, but what is your vision and your dream for the show? in 2025 and beyond?
Well, 2025 is to get another couple more live ones under our belt. Um, but beyond that, I want to do two a month is the big dream. Two a month. I'd like to have a home base, whether here in Nashville or wherever, where we can do about half of the shows at our home base. And then the other 12, I want to get on the road and do them in like different cities. And then we can bring in music talent from those cities. So we pretty much just pick up music from wherever we are. And then I'll just kind of bring the actors with me on those shows. That would be the ultimate dream. We'll see what God has in store for it. But I think it'd be so cool to fly in Thursday night, write, and kind of workshop and stuff on Fridays. Saturday, do a little bit more rehearsal, do it on a Saturday evening, and Sunday morning, back home and sitting in church.
That's cool. That would be so neat to see that come to fruition. And with the live shows you guys currently do during the year, where can folks come and see those shows? Or how can they find out about the shows?
Yeah, so our website or social media, uh, mainstreetmusicshow.com or main ST Music Show on all social media platforms is where we do it. I'm running our social media. I pretty much do everything except for act these days. So, and then I send out a newsletter every week, every month too. So if you want to get involved with that, you can find it on our website or mainstreetmusicshow@gmail.com. And I can get you hooked up in that. But I'm looking at a show maybe in the spring. And then if SonicCon comes back in 2025, then I'm going to be knocking down their door saying I want 60 to 90 minutes. Because there's so much talent there that we just bring in a lot of extra people. And so it becomes a bigger thing. But we'll see what happens. I've got a venue in Nashville. I've got a couple venues. So it's just kind of finding the cast and finding, just kind of putting the whole thing together. Logistically has been difficult, but we've got the product now that we know how the product works. We know what to do with it. It's like we have tiny little pieces that we're kind of waiting for God to put in place, if it's His will, and then we will hit the ground running. But the podcast itself, video form, is on YouTube, but then the audio is on everywhere podcasts are, or our website, or Dramify also has it.
Of course, we'll plug this later on in the episode, but we'll leave the links down in the show notes for this episode. Now, let's move on over to some of that film side of you. The first question is a fun one here. What is your favorite movie of all time? What would you pinpoint as your absolute favorite movie?
I always disappoint people with films. I love, it's kind of a hot take, but I love the movie The Village by M. Night Shyamalan. I think all the elements of that movie, it's got a great score, great cast, a great twist at the end, beautifully shot. That's one. The other ones, I'll give you like three. I love Social Network. I think that's a really well done movie. I love Casablanca. I think that was a great movie. And I'll throw in The Searchers with John Wayne and John Ford. Put those four in there.
Yeah. And I'm a big movie guy too. I love movies, and that's played a big role in my life as well. I love media and all that. So to hear that you have done some films of your own and have some award-winning mini films as well, um, how'd you uh, how'd you come up with those, and how'd you produce those?
Yeah, so I've done two features, but I was kind of brought on both features. And they're both action films, which is kind of not my forte. But I
Hmm.
have done a lot of shorts. We did a few shorts just kind of getting our feet wet early on, but then we started getting involved with these 48-hour film projects, and actually just did one this past weekend with a buddy who's in Virginia. I wrote, and then he produced it. But I loved it because, like, my goal has always been features, and I actually have a couple. I have a comedy feature that we shopped it around for a little while, didn't find what we were looking for, so I'm actually reworking it. But that hopefully would be the next film that would come out. But I don't know. We got into doing these 48s, and I love the challenge of it because I have to go so fast. I love
Yeah.
the collaboration with people and bringing in people with other, mindsets and worldviews and backgrounds, and so we did a lot of faith based ones, but we were competing mostly in secular markets and secular 48s, and so I found it to be so satisfying when we could win awards or do really well in a secular film, because it's like, you can, if you don't like the message, that's up to you. But I don't want you to discredit our movies because of
Mm-hmm.
acting, cinematography, any of the technical aspects of it. So we pushed hard to say these are going to be solid films that are going to be entertaining, and if they don't like the message, that's it's not my problem. That's between them and the Lord. But we just pushed it. We've had some great teams, and we learned how to do it. The first ones, I never slept, but recently we've learned how to write really fast. I've learned how to write very fast, and so like this last one we did, I had the whole sketch. We started at 8 o'clock at night, and I had it written, ready to shoot by midnight. So I went to bed and then made a
Wow.
call and had an actress voice over some stuff, and like the whole film probably took 10 hours total. So we kind of got
Wow.
going on that, and I think it's good. I'm I'm very happy with it.
Awesome. I know you mentioned that a lot of your work comes from scripture and biblical values, but what are some of the other inspirations for your work, whether it's the the Main Street Music Show or a film? Where do you draw inspiration, and how do you come up with the scripts so fast?
Uh, I'm always writing ideas down whenever I see something. I used to travel a lot, so I would, traveling's a great place to find ideas. Um, but a lot of it comes, which is kind of cliche. Most people are like, they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna write about my life. I'm gonna write about this, but I do write about my life a ton. But it's never me, because I always think to myself, okay, like I went through this situation, but I have these two elves that are in couples therapy. And so uh, I'll write a lot of things that I'm kind of like going through myself into those characters, and then giving the advice that I get from people. So I pull a lot from that. I have some crazy people in my family, like some older people who are a little bit, they're just characters. They're not crazy, but they're just really interesting. And so I use a lot of them. But I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I'll walk through and I hear somebody's voice and I'm like, I'll get out and film like my wife or daughter, just so I can kind of like record this someone speaking and I can hear that voice, because sometimes I hear a voice and I'm like, oh, I love that voice. And so I want to try to find a way to write that voice in or mimic that voice. But the other day, so we had this uh, this episode that we did. We have one called I do fake commercials. I love a fake commercial. So we have one called Church Candy, because we were in church the other day. So stereotypical. An older person got out a piece of candy, and it was the loudest thing in the world. And it's like, I can't focus. We're like dying laughing because it's like, so I was like, that's a great product. Let's make the loudest wrapper candy that you can think of. And then in my mind, so I took a class at Second City in Chicago for sketch writing, and they, you work in threes,
Yeah.
so you do this level, then this level, and then you hit them with the big one. And so I didn't think, okay, how can I escalate this and make this even crazier? And so at the very end, the company that makes the church candy also makes an app that if you touch your phone in the wrong way in the middle of church, it will blast verses as loud as it can. It says to a level you didn't even know your phone was possible of reaching, and then play TikTok videos afterwards. So it's just,
That's funny.
you just kind of keep your eyes open, and you see something that's interesting, and then you're like, okay, let's take it to another level. Let's make it even more ridiculous. So that's kind of how I do.
That's cool. It's just funny how even God provides those little things. Comedy writes itself almost. It's like God just gives you a little nugget almost, like you said, a rapper in a church, like the loudest thing other than like a sneeze or a kid screaming in church.
Mm.
That's just funny. And
I had one more idea. I've never written this idea because it's like
mm,
kind of toes the line, but it's
yeah,
church CPAP, because I was sitting in church one day and somebody fell asleep and was snoring, and so I was like, they need a CPAP machine. But to me, I'm like, that kind of toes the line of like, I don't want to uh, promote sleeping in church. So I was like, all right,
yeah.
we won't write that one. But I was like, that's so fun. But
That is awesome. Especially growing up in the church, you pick up on those little things too, and just again, it writes itself. That's awesome.
and it's like when I was
So
5,
what are
people were making
yeah,
noises with candy, and now I'm 40, and we're still
mhm,
making noises with candy in church. It's like it never changes.
yeah, and it's one of those things that's relatable. It's like if you're a church person, you go to church every week. It's one of those things you can pick up and relate to. That's what makes it funny. It's like that's so true. And then the
Yeah.
one person that sleeps in church that you probably can hear snoring. It's like it's just
And, and it's
you don't
also the
have to have a
fear.
curse word to be funny.
Exactly. And I've always said that, like, um, cuss words are so, they're a crutch, and people use them as a crutch all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to myself, I'm like, if you were to get rid of all those cuss words, is it still funny? And if it's not, then it needs to be rewritten. And if you get to the point where you can get rid of them and it's still funny, then why do you need it to start with? So that's always been my approach to it, which, it's hard to write clean comedy. It's hard to write relatable, clean comedy, but it's so rewarding.
Yeah,
And the Lord's just he's been great to me and given me tons of ideas, and so far it's working out.
absolutely. And that's why you have so much success. That's why Tim Hawkins, Michael Jr., all these Christian comedians have so much success. It's just because they don't rely upon that crutch of a cuss word. They rely upon just reality. It's almost like God's the master of comedy. He just puts things your way for us to laugh. God didn't design us to be these serious robotic puppets for the rest of our life. He said there's a time to laugh in Scripture, and
Hmm.
that's something we just need to do is as Christians enjoy life, the life that God's given us, and just to honestly just roll with it and just use it for His glory.
Yeah, and it's a way to kind of help people too, because again, there's so much darkness in the world that it's like we need
Mm-hmm.
uh, a, a positive escape from it, and so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good way to, like, one of the things I try to do with some of my sketches is do something with some good meat and potatoes in it. So the feature film
Mm-hmm.
that we pitched for a little while, it deals with, it's such a Christian cliche, but there's a character that's dying in the film, through the whole film. but it's still a straight up comedy, and it's kind of helping these people deal with death, because the person who's dying is the one that doesn't is not as worried about it as everybody else is. And so we use comedy as a way to um, kind of show, kind of help people deal with things, but not mask it. We're just saying that, hey, this is life, and life's tough, life's hard. You're going to go through a lot of really difficult things. But the great thing is there is a creator and a master who is knows all of it and is in charge of all of it. And so it's like, just grieve, be sad, but don't worry, because he's got it in control, complete control.
Yeah, absolutely. And comedy is just one of those things that's a comfort, especially for the Christian. And and not only do we just have that comedy, but we have the peace that passes all understanding too in those hard times. We can have so much joy in our lives because we know that our God is in control and that He is leading the way, even through those dark times of death and sorrow. So praise the Lord for that.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. We need it.
and as a writer, yeah, and as a writer and director, um, in some of those times where you feel like you just failed, what are some of the lessons you've learned and some things God's taught you through those times that you just felt like you dropped the ball on a project?
Sometimes I think that I took too much control of it, and it became too much about what I wanted and didn't kind of follow his lead. Um, Sometimes I feel like God's telling me, hey, I need you to take a break and just focus on something else for this little season, and then we'll get back to it. Um, but I think ultimately it's all the comfort, because I had one show that I tried to produce, put a lot of money into it, and it it completely failed, like completely failed. We did not even we had to cancel the show 5 minutes after the show was to start, and I had flown people in. Like, I spent a lot of money on it, and uh, at the end of that, I was like completely devastated, and I'm starting to see a little bit more now as to why it happened. But at the same time, um, it's it was supposed to fail, and that's a hard pill to take. But I know that that failure is what was supposed to happen, and that the Lord kind of was orchestrating all this. And so it's like, all right, it's fine. And I took a little break after that. Um, but I had some great material in that show, and a lot of elements of the show just didn't come together, and so we were kind of rushing a little bit. Fast forward 6 or 7 months, we got the SonicCon gig, and so I brought some of that material back out.
Hmm.
And right before the show, we were kind of huddled up, and he's kind of Daniel Cross is kind of he's a great leader, and he's huddled up, and he goes, you know what, Jake, that show's supposed to fail, because we were we needed to get it to right here. A lot of that material from that show needs to be tonight, because we have a great audience, we have a great setup. This is a big deal, and I'm I hate that it failed, but I'm so thankful to be here, and so that helped me put it in perspective. So you know that's one reason why I'm like, I love the people that I work with. I'm very picky about the people that I work with, but I love them because they're great representations of what I want to put out in the world with the show, and they're just great people to spend time with, because they're so they're just so edifying, good people. So, but failure's hard.
When you have that great group of people, like you said, it makes it a lot easier to move on and to continue on, and not just slump over like "woe is me," but to know that, hey, we learned from this. We're going to make it even better next time. So that's so
Mm-hmm.
awesome that you have that group that
And
surrounds you.
uh, let me, if I can add one more thing to that. When you're making a movie, you're kind of bringing people in
Sure.
for the first time, and you probably worked with them a couple times. Um, but it's very difficult because you have to be on your A game with them at all times. And if you're not, and they, it's kind of like this, we're all looking for weaknesses in each other. But with this show, I have the same people pretty much every single show. I know them very well. They know me very well. And I can handle a script. Like we can sit down with a script. And I'll tell them, I'll be like, the script is terrible. Like, it's just not good. I was like, but the idea is still there. So we're going to read it. It's going to be bad. At the end of it, we're all going to be like, oof. But we can work on it together and make this thing better. And so it's now I can be more vulnerable with them because I know it's a safe space and it allows us to be more collaborative and foster a lot more creativity, which is not something you get a lot on film sets.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's one of those great things of being a Christian is knowing that uh, you can work with a common group of people, a common mindset, in a mission to accomplish that for the Lord's glory.
Yeah,
And,
it's great.
know that you stand on common ground with that mission. So
Mm-hmm.
that's awesome. Um, is there a story or is there a memory that you can pinpoint and just look back and see where God showed up the greatest in any project you worked on or any part of your life in the media and film industry?
Uh, that's a good question. When we did our first feature film called My House, we had some things happen where we were like, it's like we need a good car for this scene. Um, and like somebody's like, oh, I can make a quick call, and then we have a car. So like that stuff's been kind of cool, of like how the Lord's worked in those ways. Uh, to me, it's kind of been the longer game of um, uh, uh, so when we started film, we put together this little group and we did this thing called Prayer and Share. And every Thursday, we would get together and just pray and share what God's been doing in our lives. And uh, we would do that if we didn't have a project going. And then we would go work on a movie and we would take that concept into the movie. And so we would do prayer and share before every shoot that we did. And um, I've worked on a decent set of films, most of them my own, but I've worked on a few other people's films too. And I've never felt something like what we had as a group because we knew each other so well at such like an intimate level. I mean, we had prayed for each other. We prayed through good. We prayed through bad. Prayed through just days. Um, and so there were many moments when we were working on My House, the film, where I would just like everybody felt good. Like everybody was calm and it was such a great atmosphere. But there were so many times where I would just sit there and look at this cast and everyone's smiling and everyone's happy and everyone's working very hard and working very fast. And I'm like, I, there's nothing I could do that could make that happen. There's nothing my other producers could do that could make that happen. I'm like, that's the Lord telling us to do it the right way, to get together, to become a unit before we ever even get on a film set. And so it's like those moments of just community that I find to be like the Lord is right there. And we get that with the show. I um, get that with Jamie and with Daniel and with all the people that I've brought in. It's just like it just the attitudes of these people are just phenomenal because the Lord has put them here. We haven't really sought after them. The Lord brought them in, and that's where I'm like, it's in the people that I feel like I see it the absolute most.
That's awesome. It's just neat to see the Lord's hand. And again, back to that thought of a team and how God brings those pieces together, exactly who you need to accomplish the work at hand for His honor and His glory.
Yeah.
Um, as we draw this episode to a close, which it's been a lot of fun talking with you
Ah,
today and just hearing
dang,
your
we're
heart
getting to the end.
for your
That
work.
stinks.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you back on again sometime to talk about what God's doing and then through your work, because it sounds like this is just the beginning of what He's starting to do, and we're excited to see where He's going to lead you down the road with it. But what's a bit of advice you would give listeners that are looking to pursue any form of media, whether it's film, audio, just any form of media? What's some advice you would give listeners that are looking to pursue that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a professor, so I'm always like, okay, go learn the craft, learn how to do it well. Um, but the hard advice, because that's easy, because you can get on YouTube, you can go to school, you can do whatever.
Mhm.
But the hard advice is um, that you just got to keep going. I've had a lot of friends who are way more talented than I am who gave up, and they had families and they had things, and so maybe they gave up's the wrong word, but they aren't doing this anymore because it got to be a lot for them. Um, I I have felt since I was a kid that like I was supposed to be in entertainment, and I I've gotten to this point now where the people who have surrounded me who are more talented than me have kind of um, they've gotten like burnout or worn out, and I've spent all this time learning and learning and failing and writing that now it's like, okay, I've outlasted them, and I've also been able to build my skills for 20 years for this. It really wasn't until about 5 years ago. I mean, I wrote my first kind of sketch when I was in high school, so I was 17. I'm 40 now. But it was about 5 years ago that I wrote my first project that I actually enjoyed, that I was like, okay, that's pretty good. But it took me, 15 years of writing things that I knew was the best that I could do and knowing that it wasn't good enough. But I put it out in the world. I finished the project. I moved on. And I was like, I know I can do better. Let me work on this aspect. And I kept going. I used to be a terrible dialogue writer, and I spent a long time writing dialogue. And now that's all I do. With a sketch show, that's all I have is dialogue. And so I feel, after 20 some years of doing this, that I finally have gotten to a point where it's like I'm happy with what I'm doing. I want to get better, but just know it takes a long time. And some people, Nate Bargatze, who's a clean stand-up comedian, says this. He's like, you either make it at 25 or you make it at 45, and there's really not anything in between. And I didn't make it at 25, and I'm closing in on 45, so we'll see what the Lord has in store. But I knew I was never as talented as the other people, but I worked hard and I outworked a lot of people, and I built up my skills, and um, it just kept going. You just keep going, and I love my work. I love it. It's so hard, but I just love it so much, and uh, yeah, I just and when you're doing it for a higher purpose, it makes the failures a little bit easier to grasp.
Absolutely. That's some good advice and takeaways for all of us. Whether you're pursuing a media um, industry position or a job, or if you're going to math, science, whatever you may be doing, don't give up and remember why God put you there. It's to serve a purpose and a plan for such a time as this. And don't give up, and be the best you can be for God. So
Amen to
that's
that.
awesome. And then some final questions we have here that we ask all of our guests. What is a verse you would say is your life verse that you can pinpoint and say, this means something to me, and why is that verse um, stick out to you?
I get this question a lot. I don't really know if I too much have a life verse, but one that I always I've actually spent a long time trying to memorize is, and it's funny because my church right now is actually going through it, but it's Colossians 3. Let me get the exact numbers. I have it written down. Colossians 3:12 through 17. Um, because it's such a clear way of living. It's very clear as to how the Lord, how we can be more like Jesus. So, and then the nice thing is the church going through that. I've seen kind of the background going into that verse, but I just feel like that's a gives you hope. It allows you to kind of know what what the expectations are, and kind of what to get to, and it also helps because it reminds you really that God's in control.
Those are a good set of verses too, and I love verse 17. Whatsoever you do and whatever you do it all to the glory of God and Christ Jesus. And that's really the theme of this episode today is whatever you're doing, do it for the glory of God and Him only.
Amen.
That's so awesome. And then another question we ask. So each Saturday we like to highlight a song that means something to our guests on the show. Whether it's a praise and worship song, whatever it may be, what's a song that has ministered to you that you would like to highlight this week for our song of the week?
Uh, it's kind of ridiculous. There's two, but I'm going to go with one that I think is more fun. The Newsboys song
Okay.
"Take Me to Your Leader."
Yeah. Yes.
I love Steve Taylor wrote. I love the Newsboys. Steve Taylor wrote that song. I've actually had the pleasure of I get to teach with Steve Taylor at Lipscomb University, which is kind
That's
of
cool.
blows my mind. But the way he writes songs is the way I try to write dialogue. It's so clever and it's so practical and
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, and I love the Newsboys. I love their Australian voices. The older, I mean, I like the newer
The
Newsboys, but
original.
the Peter Furler
Yeah.
Newsboys and Phil Joel. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a really fun one. That's actually the song that I've written this film around.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the I guess quote unquote OG Newsboys, they had some really interesting songs, and like you said, "Take Me to Your Leader," "Breakfast," and all those
Oh,
songs.
yeah.
Shine. But
Oh,
yeah,
so
we'll
good. But
definitely highlight that
uh,
this weekend.
the other one I said would have said was "He Reigns," which is a lot more serious version, a serious song.
Mm-hmm.
But it's again still Newsboys, but it's so beautifully written.
So, who has been your favorite newsboy over the years?
I love Peter Furler. He is, the Bald Club. I've gotten to meet him once.
Mm-hmm.
He's he
Cool.
is on my list. If I get to the point where I can get Peter Furler on the show, I may retire the next day. We'll see. But he's like, I just love Peter Furler. I like his style. I like his voice. Just love him.
It'd be interesting if you had Duncan Phillips on your show too. I think he'd be a funny addition too.
So Peter Furler would play music, but Duncan Phillips would be in a sketch for sure.
Mm-hmm. And he's one of those guys that's basically pretty much been there the whole time. Like he's been a
Yeah,
staple since the early days.
yeah, he's the only
That's
Australian left, I
awesome.
think.
Because you got Tate, Frankenstein. Uh, You got Adam Agee
Jody,
now, and
yeah, Jody.
yeah,
What's Jody's name? Last name. Anyway, yeah.
yeah, those are good guys, and just love their heart for the Lord too, and just their mission.
Yeah.
So, did you ever get to see the Newsboys United when they did that short tour? When they brought back Peter and Joel?
Phil Joel. Yeah. I probably saw him 5 or 6 times. I mean, I was not going to miss it because
Nice.
I made fun of the Newsboys a little bit when I was younger, and then I really got into them. But Phil Joel and Peter Furler had already left. So as soon as I saw that they were getting back together for the United, oh my gosh, I was like anywhere within 300 miles I was going.
That's awesome.
Like, just to put it in perspective, yeah. So Peter Furler and Phil Joel got together and played with New Song and Rebecca St. James in Atlanta, and I was living in Detroit, and I literally flew down that morning, went to the show, got to meet them all, and then flew back the next morning. That's how much I was like, I gotta go see them.
Wow. That is a great group right there. When you have those, that's the 90s, like, CCM music right there. Some of the highlights.
Exactly.
So cool we got to do that.
Yeah.
And then the last question here, we kind of alluded to it earlier, but how can folks get connected with you and with the projects you're working on?
Yeah, so mainstreetmusicshow.com, or you can search it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Dramify if you're into audio dramas, or all social media is Main ST Music Show. All my social media, YouTube, all that. And then mainstreetmusicshow@gmail.com.
Awesome. All right. We'll link all those down in the show notes below, so check those out. And don't miss this month's episode of the show. And again, you can find those on all your favorite streaming platforms. But Jacob, it was great having you on here. We definitely want to have you back and just catch up and see what the Lord is doing through you and the projects you're working on. We're excited to see what he has in store.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on here. It's been an absolute blast. And we can just get on here and talk about 90s CCM if you want to. I'd be happy to do that too.
Absolutely. Bring it on, man. And one of the things our listeners know is we love Christian music. We love CCM. And I don't remember if it's first or second season. My former co-host and I, that's literally all we talked about. We came up with our own predictions for Winter Jam. We went through all the whole history of it. Was crazy. But we love our music here. So that's a good idea. We could definitely come back on here and talk about that. But
Let's do it. I'm excited.
Stay tuned, everyone. Awesome. Thanks again, Jacob. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Ride of Your Life podcast. We hope it was a blessing, help, and encouragement to you. You can view this episode as well as other episodes over on our YouTube channel. Simply search Ride of Your Life Ministries. While you're there, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss an episode of the podcast. Also, you can connect with us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Ride of Your Life Ministries, and also on X at ROYL Ministries, and that's Royal without the A. You can visit our brand new merch shop, Ride of Your Life shop.myspreadshop.com, to catch some really cool merch that you can make Christ known in the parks and wherever you may go. You can find a link to our merch shop as well as learn a little bit more about who we are as a ministry and catch some upcoming events. Simply go to rideofyourlifeministries.com. You can text us at the ROYL Hotline at 513-285-8319. We hope you have a great week, and we will see you here next Monday on the Ride of Your Life podcast.